1530, April 22nd, 2025. Right now marks 996 hours of progress on the global horror simulation. Currently, custom 3D meshes can be loaded into the scene with different textures, and multiple models can be rendered simultaneously. And this doesn't just apply for this specific wireframe cube model, which is actually more like a wireframe of a wireframe, since the original object in Blender had the faces cut out, and looking at that with wireframe disabled, it would look like so. It would look like that. And one of the issues with drawing that without wireframe is that some of the edges in the back don't appear, whereas with drawing it in wireframe it's easy to see those. And not only does this work for drawing the cube, but an entirely different model can be rendered simultaneously, such as the monkey head from Blender. And yeah, one of the cool things about wireframe mode is that it allows one to see all the triangles, and in other tutorial projects it was sort of tricky to get wireframe working, as for some reason it didn't seem to be drawing some of the geometry right. But it seems that one of the cases or causes of that may have been either something to do with the rasterizer state or depth sensor state, or perhaps the renderer using draw indexed for those projects, since they were drawing simple quads and the quads weren't being drawn right in wireframe mode. But this is more complex geometry, but it's rendering correctly, and the only difference is this renderer uses the normal draw with just drawing raw vertices, which perhaps another reason to not use draw index for this sort of project is that it's simple to get working for quads, but anything beyond quads, calculating the list of indices for that is very tricky for 3D geometry. But just passing in raw vertices is much more simple and straightforward, and that's basically the entire point of this renderer. Now, the way to do this is just having a function to basically create the object, load in the mesh, apply the texture, and bind that to the shaders, and initialize the buffers and such on the DirectX side. And then there's a model view projection matrix set up with the camera, and after initializing all of that, the object's position in world space is updated, and then the matrix for that constant buffer in the shader is updated to be multiplied by the view and projection, and then the model has to be binded every frame. Else, if that doesn't occur, if the models aren't binded, an interesting bug occurs, which is that the second model will get drawn but the first won't. Yeah, so that's what happens, and that was a really tricky bug to figure out, but yeah, it was figured out within the past hour. So now that that has been actually figured out, which is a very important thing to know, so models have to be bound. Going forward, this draw operation can be moved into something such as this, where it just loops through all the objects and draws them as needed. And so the intention going forward, now that 3D models can be rendered, such as two cubes, is to actually try and make a basic physics system where overlapping between two cubes, or checking their distance and seeing if they're touching slightly, can be addressed. And after that, it would be able to just load in models and test for very basic collisions, and start to simulate other things, and figure out how to do animation. And yeah, so that's the intention going forward, is to create a basic physics system for cubes, and then go from there. adding in more functionality to this custom DirectX renderer.